Welcome to the Ag Weather Outlook, February 20th, 2016. I'm John Felt. Well, here's the precipitation over the last 7 days. Most of it was over the southeast U.S., Tennessee River Valley, and the eastern U.S. There was some precipitation over the primary corn belt, and some of it was moderate in intensity up here in this region right here. But overall, it was below normal, and you can see a lot of red and yellow here, especially over the eastern corn belt that has been trending dry. It was another dry week. Now, there was some light snow here, a couple patches of more moderate snow in the yellow dots, but I think the big story was snow melt. Now, this was 1 week ago. And look at the snow depth there from parts of eastern Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota into Wisconsin. 10 inches, some cases close to 15 inches. And because of the warm weather over the last couple of weeks, and I sent out a post about this, how I thought a lot of this was going to melt. Look at this drastic melting over the last couple of days here, primarily on Friday. And you can see we lost a lot of that snow cover, and even in Minnesota, that's going to be gone as well. So we're going to be losing a lot of our snow cover. We already have. This is the estimate of snow melt. About an inch here per 24-hour period of melt. So one of my thoughts as far as the spring flood outlook was, and I put out a post on this about a managed melting, is that what we don't want is we don't want this to build up late in the year and then have that threat of being overrun by precipitation, spring precipitation. So if we can get this into the rivers, off the ground, into the rivers, and then draining out of here at this time, even though it's going to put some pressure on rivers in the short term, in the long term, I think this is a sign of a reduced threat of spring snow melt flooding on main stem rivers, not necessarily the smaller tributaries. So we can see that many of the rivers in Iowa and Wisconsin where this snow melt has occurred, we do see some high within bank flows for the most part, and these are these yellow rectangle or squares here, and that's saying that rivers have gone from a fairly low level up towards a fairly high level, but mainly within banks still, and doesn't look like there's going to be much flooding with this. Again, we get this out of the off the ground into the rivers, and the outlook looks fairly dry. So right now I don't see signs of any real significant buildup of snow or a very heavy rain event at this time. So this is actually a positive for reducing that threat, but there's a long way to go. We need to keep an eye on it. The other big story are our temperatures, and it goes along with that snow melt. Temperatures are well above normal. We're looking at 15 degrees above normal in these shades of purple over the region. You can actually see here, because of some of that snow, a little bit less here, more like maybe 10 degrees, but overall well above normal temperatures as we start out this outlook period. Now, last week I mentioned to you that I like to look in winter, midwinter, up at the source regions where cold air is pooling, because if this cold air starts to really pool up here, just a matter of time before it moves south. So last week we had cold air over the eastern U.S., but we had this warm air here, and I sort of said I thought that might be brought down into the area, and it did. And then this is the current condition. Well, look at this. I see some cold air. It's really reversed here. This is almost a total reversal of a week ago. Now we have this very warm air over the area, but we have some cold air up in the source region. Now, I don't think this is a lot of cold air. I don't think it's a real intense cold air. But again, with it in that source region, I think it's a matter of time before it pushes down to the south. Now, we've had about 5 stages of winter so far. I've talked about this a lot. We're exiting stage 5 here, positive Arctic oscillation, and we're starting to get into perhaps this next period here. And whereas the beginning of the winter had these real long periods, and this is one reason there's some thought that we had this positive Arctic oscillation, and that's one reason why some of the precipitation patterns haven't really been as typical as El Nino as you would normally think. And then we went into this negative that lasted quite some time, but they're switching around a lot more frequently now. And I wouldn't say that's not typical. That is sort of typical to get these switching back and forth. But it looks like the next one, these red squiggly lines, are more of a negative Arctic oscillation again. And as you know, that usually means over the eastern parts of the U.S., colder than normal temperatures, and over the west, most likely warmer than normal. and the Corn Belt is often right in the middle, where the central and east is in the cooler air or colder air, the west is in the milder air. So here's a jet stream this week. It looks like a transition week, and when we have a transition, what do we think of? Possible storm system with this transition. So the jet stream's beginning to break down again, build in this trough. Temperatures are going to be variable, so let's don't focus too much on this average, because it's going to be starting off the first several days very mild, and then some of that cold air will be working in. Now, I think what we need to do here is we need to watch this system on Wednesday, midweek. This will really be the transitional storm system that the cold air will be pushing in behind it. Model runs have not locked in on this yet. The prior model run had a fairly major snow. This one does not. But if there would be a major snow, it looks like it could be over the eastern Corn Belt towards right in the middle of the week. Right now, the models aren't showing that, but they have been flip-flopping, so that could change. One of the reasons why we have to keep an eye on it is that this is precipitable water, the total amount of water in the atmosphere, and it's unusually high. When we see this unusually high precipitable water, that means there's the potential for heavier precipitation. Mainly rain, but on the cold side, the possibility of snow. We're just going to have to see how that works out right now. It's very early. Well, here's the 7-day rainfall. As you can see, most of the upper Midwest and central Midwest, a fairly quiet week. But once you get in that moisture, that deeper moisture, south central U.S., southeast U.S., Ohio and Tennessee river valleys, much more active, a couple inches of rain, a soaking rain for that area. And let's just keep in mind here that in this cold air, there could be some significant snow. Let's just wait as we go the next couple of days, get a better handle on that. Okay, so let's take a look at the jet stream outlook as we go a little bit further into the month of February and actually into March. Looks like we're going to get into the 6 to 10 day period with this pattern. We've seen this before on and off throughout the winter. This is a colder pattern. You can see temperatures really begin to cool down. I wouldn't call this extreme over most areas, but central and eastern Corn Belt do look like there's going to be a cooling spell in the 6 to 10 day period. Then as we get into early March, you can see it begins to go back. So we're sort of in a roller coaster type pattern here as far as temperatures go, most likely starting out in early March with near normal temperatures over the east and above normal in the west. As far as precipitation goes, a little bit more agreement with the models is I can't rule out one of these sort of a rogue system here or isolated system, but I think the overall pattern is far below normal precipitation for the next 2 weeks. So let's keep an eye on that winter storm or possible winter storm this week towards the middle of the week. I think if it does occur, it affect parts of the eastern Corn Belt, but models high degree of uncertainty at this time. The trends overall are west to east, west warmer, east colder, and then this roller coaster pattern, cooler temperatures later this week, then colder next week, and then milder again, and continued below normal precipitation. I hope you all have a great week, and we'll be briefing you again next weekend.